Hi everyone, LazyFire here. Welcome back to Battlefield 4 Multiplayer. Today we're playing on Siege of Shanghai once again, but this time we're going to be talking about a vehicle rather than the map itself. But I am going to make an appearance on parts of the level that we didn't really talk about in the previous video, so there's going to be some time to talk about those as well. But today we are talking about the attack chopper. Say hello to the American one. Yeah. That's an intimidating way to start a game, but luckily for me, battle pickups. Battle pickups are weapons that are scattered around the maps that anyone can pick up, and they usually have some special abilities or loadouts that you wouldn't really see in the real world. They're also weapons you can't equip, of course. For example, this thing fires 3 rockets at once if you hold a lock onto a vehicle. Say goodbye, helicopter. There are other ones, like the USAS shotgun with frag rounds and a rifle scope on it, and of course there are a complement of sniper rifles with pretty powerful scopes and that do a ton of damage. So be on the lookout for battle packs. Battle pickups. I've walked past quite a few of them in the time we've been doing these videos that I just never really felt the need to pick up. But right there, easy kill on an attack helicopter. Why not take it? Anyways, the attack helicopters really need to be talked about in the context of the previous game and this game. In Battlefield 3, these things were really, really scary things. They could do a ton of damage to you at any given time. They could just rain death and fire down upon you with their Hydra rockets, and of course there's a gunner seat on the attack helicopters, so you'd often get gunned down by this guy just hanging out in the gunner seat of the attack helicopter. And they have such good range of motion in Battlefield 3 and 4 that they were a real threat. Of course, in Battlefield 3, one of the things you could do was hang out basically in the skybox at the very top of the map, so far away that rockets with lock-on capabilities couldn't touch you. And you could sit up there and fire with the gunner seat down into the people on the ground and do massive amounts of damage and kill people pretty easily. It was pretty annoying to see, and there's a bit of a nerf for that in this game in the way that they've made you now have an ammo system, but you also cannot go as high as you used to be able to. I think they said now 50 or 5, I think it was 50 meters above the tallest building is as tall as a helicopter can go in this game. So it's not very tall. I've never really seen a limitation to this. A lot of people complained when the game was first debuting that that was a really poor way to fix some of the things that helicopters could do, because you could still hang out outside of the map, basically, and fire on people from outside of range, but I haven't seen that either. Right there, I was killed by Dr. Strangelove, and he basically euthanized me so I can get into my autism chariot here. Sausage Feast is a goon who basically said, I don't know how to fly this thing, please someone come get it, and I volunteered. I don't think I do badly here. I don't think I do great either. It's probably my best attack helicopter run, but most of it still assists. So let's talk a bit about the attack helicopter and how it handles. In Battlefield 3, it was actually pretty mobile, really agile. You could do some pretty cool stuff with it. In Battlefield 4, a lot of the speed and maneuverability has been stripped away, and you're left with this kind of slow-moving, plodding. I wouldn't say it's terrible in a lot of ways, but it moves oddly. There's a serious momentum to this thing, and once you get going to speed, it's very difficult to slow it down without just absolutely breaking whatever you're doing entirely. So you have to be very careful about that. Your momentum can carry you into buildings and all this other stuff. You'll see me swing left and right pretty hard, tilting the helicopter left and right, and in those moments I really risk just knocking this thing so far to the side that it cannot recover. Right here I'm getting fired on from the spawn AA, it's automated, so I have to be careful. But right there you saw I tilted to the left pretty hard, and I almost ran into that other building before I could even correct. And you can also see I took a fair amount of damage going down there. These things used to be basically flying tanks in Battlefield 3, but in Battlefield 4 they are pretty vulnerable to most things. Heavy machine guns, mobile AAs, machine guns that are just mounted on vehicles. You'll see later on, I take one out using a light machine gun mounted to an LAV. Of course, small arms cannot damage them, so you have to make sure you use something like a cannon or something like that. But helicopters will go down in one shot from a tank, or if a active radar missile hits them, they'll probably go down. And one hit from a heat-seeking missile will damage it pretty badly and send it into a not a tailspin rather, but a disabled moment. And if you get two shots in with the heat seeker, you'll probably kill it. And of course, one of the issues with the attack helicopters is that the recharge time on the flares is so long. It's 25 or so seconds. And that means that you're going to pop these things and then be vulnerable for almost half a minute to anyone who wants to lock on. Stingers, by comparison, take about 4 seconds to reload. So the person who makes you pop flares the first time only needs to wait basically until your invulnerability to flare or to lock-ons is over before they can lock onto you again. Really ridiculous stuff. I also have this tendency, by the way, to deploy my flares way, way, way too early. I should really wait till someone fires at me, but I don't often do that. Watch here, I'm going to hit this guy with a heat seeker. You'll see just about how much damage he takes from it. About 20 points. Not a ton. It's enough to make him have to go lick his wounds for a few minutes, and that's kind of what you want to do here. You'll also notice that he took a lot of damage from sitting underneath Sausage Feast here. One of the big tricks and tips, or whatever, I can give you when using an attack helicopter is to get above the other helicopter. That works out for almost every helicopter, actually. It's very difficult for them to get a lock-on on you. It's very difficult for them to get an angle on you without losing their own altitude and putting them at risk of crashing into the ground. And, of course, in the attack helicopter, you have gunners. And if your gunner is worth his weight in the gunner seat, he's going to be able to just light the other helicopter up if you give him an angle. And he's got plenty of angles to work with because that gunner seat is really, really wide-ranging. Now, one of the things I really like about the attack helicopter is that the weapons it has from the start, you don't really need to replace them. The Hydra rockets are great, the heat-seeking missiles are great. You can put Zunis on and basically have two sets of rockets to start with the helicopter, but the inability to deal with other helicopters by losing your heat-seeking missiles is a bit too much for me, and I'm not really going to make that change ever. One of the big things I really like, though, is once you get good with this thing, you can fly it pretty effectively through buildings and all this other stuff. You don't really want to take this vehicle on a closed map of any nature, or sorry, an open map. You really want a map like this one or like Operation Dawnbreaker that allows you to have a lot of cover to hide behind because of how short your flares last. Right there, I forgot about the tail. This won't be the first time I lose spatial awareness while flying this thing. It's very easy to forget about those things. We saw it in the jet video where I bumped the tail of my aircraft against the ground when flying, really close to it. And in this case, flying between buildings, you kind of forget how long your vehicle is. And sometimes it's tough to judge because all the helicopters are not the same length. And right here, that's just stupidity on my part. It's the end of that run. What happened there was I forget which things in the world are tangible and intangible. In that case, the spikes on the very top of that radio tower are very tangible, and I crashed straight into them. I can't help it. I'm dumb sometimes. It's very interesting with flying vehicles, especially in this game, what things are tangible and aren't tangible. There was a time where you could basically plow through trees with an attack helicopter, and not so much anymore. Or you could knock over lampposts, or some of them are made of titanium, though, and, stuck 25 feet into the ground secretly. Very dangerous stuff. Here I get gunned down before I even hit the ground. So yes, attack helicopters, while being less maneuverable and less deadly than in Battlefield 3, are still a viable weapon to use against people in Battlefield 4. The issue is that you need to be one of the people who know what they're doing with the damn things. A person with no idea what they're doing is going to have a bad time. A person with an idea what they're doing is still probably not going to be doing great, unfortunately. There are, like I said, the maneuverability issues and the ability for one of those things to kill someone is pretty reduced from what it was in the previous game, and that makes for a difficult time to be super effective with them. But I've still seen people go on pretty long streaks with the helicopters in this game. That is, of course, anecdotal evidence. I'm sure someone's going to show some empirical evidence here to the other perspective. As a matter of fact, Dice would actually like to show some. Recently, the balance guy, as he's known, Alan Kurtz, or Demise, was tweeting that they had some stats on the vehicles with the longest time between kills, or sorry, lowest kills per minute. And the attack helicopter, watch this, this is stupid of me. I knew there were guys near this roof, I didn't know where. Anyways, the attack helicopter was number one. It had the least kills per minute flown. And some of this has to be attributed to people using the thing like a goddamn taxi to get on top of buildings, or other people not being able to find targets, or what have you. There's, of course, things like that. The second was the mobile anti-aircraft gun, which is sort of the, I would say, exact opposite of the attack helicopter. It can knock those things down like no one's business, and it usually does just take those things right out. But because a lot of the time when you use it, your kills do not count as kills, they count as like roadkill deaths or something like that. People don't have as high kills per minute on that thing as they might usually should have. Oh, and here I completely ignore the levolution of the tower falling down. If you look over there onto the right, to fire on this man. Soon the screen's going to shake too much for me to actually shoot him effectively, but I'm going to keep trying anyways. But yes, that is what it looks like when that tower falls down. You can see the map changes. The dust storm starts up and it has kind of an epicenter there, but all the paper that's flying around everything kind of has a point now. It's actually really cool. There were some points where people would not be able to look directly at that thing, especially in the beta. If you looked at it as it was falling, the game would lock up on you or freeze or do something to you. They've mostly fixed that now. I haven't heard of anyone having that problem for quite some time. Anyways, the attack helicopters. If we want to keep talking about them, they've got some pretty interesting secondary weapons for the gunners as well. One of those things is a TV missile. It's a missile that allows them to basically remote control a rocket from a distance, or they fire out of the front of the helicopter. It's actually pretty effective. A lot of people will use that to, in boats especially, to kill people from the other end of the map with impunity. Really annoying to play against sometimes, but with the helicopter, I've never really seen it in action. I think people haven't spent enough time in the helicopters to really unlock all the stuff with them. I'm sure somebody has spent a lot of time in that thing at some point and proven us all wrong, but so far no such luck. I really would have liked to have stolen that LAV, but I will take what I can get. Would have liked to have C4'd that guy too. Oh, and I'm reminded how bad I am with pistols. Nice. So we're actually over on E. I didn't really explore this point when we were here last time for Siege of Shanghai. But there's a pretty good cafe area here. You can knock down a lot of these walls. And of course, there's an elevator nearby that you've already seen me take up there to the top and jump off of. I really should have pointed this out when we were over there, but there was a point where I was looking straight up, and there were a few guys on geometry there that I probably could have shot with impunity. They were not looking at me, they were sniping. Alright, we were jumping in our friend the Bears here, LAV. This is how weak these helicopters are. I'm actually able to disable that thing with one set of LAV machine gun bullets and then kill a guy with it. I'll take it. I will take those deaths and kills when they come to me. Oh, and as I mentioned before, you look at the score right now, look how far ahead we are as China. That's kind of ridiculous. They've been threatening E almost the entire game, and we're doing a really good job of just keeping them off the other points, and have basically drained a lot of their tickets pretty easily. This game is only 14 minutes in, and they're down to 200 tickets while we have 600. Kind of nuts. And right there you saw me raise the bollards. The bollards are something I mentioned in the post about this map, but you're able to put those up or down and kind of block people's abilities to get over hills and such, or in this case over the bridge. So by doing that, I actually stopped my team from going anywhere, but I've also stopped the enemy team from getting any further. Kind of a brilliant move. If you know it's going to be effective, you might as well do it. One of the things I really like doing is actually getting all three of our tanks over the over this bridge, putting the bollards up, going to the next bridge, putting the bollards up after we get over. So it means that the other team doesn't really have as much of a chance to get out if we don't really do well with the tanks. They're going to be stuck at a choke point for a few seconds. And right here I get stabbed. That's painful stuff. So, with regards to attack helicopters, on open maps, they're not great. The long recharge time on the flares and the uh, really lack of maneuverability for the things is not really helping them. One of the other things you should keep in mind about helicopters in Battlefield 3 versus Battlefield 4 is that there was this always-on perk of a nature or another called below radar, or it wasn't really an intentional thing apparently. I was reading into this the other day. It was never really an intentional thing, but basically if you flew low enough to the ground, people with lock-on weapons couldn't lock onto you. And because of that, a lot of helicopter pilots got really, really good at flying really low to the ground and basically risking getting hit by RPGs and tank shells instead of getting locked onto. Kind of a brilliant move in the end, but people have been clamoring for this to come back in Battlefield 4. So far, there has been a statement on this to the effect of, we're not bringing it back for Battlefield 4, so quit whining, you babies. Which I can understand why DICE would say that, because this time they actually had things in there they intended to be there. I would really still like to see, if you want to be effective in the helicopter, some sort of reduction in the time it takes to flare, and a little bit more maneuverability. And there is talk of those two things. One of them especially is offensive abilities being upped for the gunner seat. There is a patch that is in effect for the PlayStation 4 as of this recording. There's been no announced date for the PC, but rather it would increase how much damage the gunner cannon does to vehicles, and that would actually be pretty neat to see. If you're able to get something of an assist from your gunner on a vehicle kill, how effective are you going to be versus how effective were you before? And that's a good question, I think. If the gunner actually can do something now, then great. That might mean that the attack helicopter is a little bit more balanced towards fighting ground units. But at this time, it's really better as a station of to fire heat seekers from, rather than a world-class or top-tier weapon. Which is unfortunate. I can understand a lot of people spend a lot of time in Battlefield 3 helicopters who are not super happy about this. Of course, the issue with the attack helicopter is also that of the helicopters, no one can hang out of the attack helicopter and repair it as it takes damage like they can with the Little Bird or even the transport helicopter. And for some people this is problematic because taking damage is kind of part of the thing. Stingers don't do overly much damage per shot, but they still do enough damage to make it concerning. Right here, I was killed by a Dow. I was killed by one earlier as well by another goon. That is a weapon that appeared in the Second Assault DLC, and it has some crazy range and some crazy damage to it. So expect to see a lot more of those in the next few videos that I do that were from that same time period. Dows are just everywhere and they're deadly. But yes, somebody with a pretty good grasp of how to use an RPG, or how to use a mobile AA gun, or how to use a lock-on weapon is probably going to be really, really effective against an attack helicopter. They're just kind of vulnerable overall. There's actually a chart out there showing a 360 degree area, 180 degrees is the ground, and then the other 180 degrees is the area where the attack helicopter is vulnerable to things. And they include the mobile AA, tanks, rocket launchers, and other air vehicles. There's no area where it's super effective against, which is unfortunate. I think every vehicle needs to have something of a niche, and there's just not one for the attack helicopter at this time. It'd be nice if it filled the role of maybe a slower scout helicopter or something like that, where it was really good for strafing runs and getting in and out of an area quickly, but right now it's not really good for that because of the maneuverability issues that I've already mentioned a couple times. Right here I'm getting shot by a guy with a DMR. You can hear him just miss it over and over and over again, but he must have tagged me. I must have a Dorito over my head because people knew to come get me. Watch, this is dumb. Should have thrown a grenade here to start off. These guys were waiting for me. Ooh, that guy got hit with a missile there. So, yes, we're pretty close to the end of this game. You can see how fast the Chinese side can really just absolutely decimate this map. You can see they're also bunched up mostly over on that D flag. They had to send a lot of their manpower over there, and they're just kind of slowly moving down the map in a lot of ways. But they do have enough people to take out this LAV. Someday, I swear, I will get to talking about the LAVs for a video. They're an interesting class of vehicle, but staying in one long enough these days is getting a little bit more difficult. A lot of people like to use them, and on top of that, a lot of people are unlocking the top tier weapons like the SRAW and using javelins and laser sights and such, and making life a little difficult for these things because they're not as heavily armored as a tank would be. Oh, but you can see there, that's the danger of the attack helicopter. Strafing runs, very dangerous because you have to tilt that nose down pretty hard to get any sort of angle on people. So a lot of the time you end up crashing into a building or getting right in front of somebody after you fire on them. And that's why you should really learn how to fly the attack helicopter before you try to do it in a game, because you have to really figure out what your height level is. Anyways, thanks for watching everyone. I hope to see you next time. We'll cover another vehicle. Thanks. Bye.